Hola y bienvenidos a todos al tercer episodio del Spanish Bloopers podcast. Yo soy tu host, Josue, and today I have a very special guest that will be sharing about her experience language learning and learning the Spanish language. So could you please tell me about yourself, where are you from, and what is your native tongue?
Okay, hi guys. So I'm Niyah, and I am from Philadelphia here in the USA. So my native language is English.
Okay. And how old were you when you first got exposed to the Spanish language?
When I was first exposed to Spanish, I want to say probably around 1 year old or so. My mom used Spanish and American Sign Language with me as a baby, so.
Wow. And do you know how much that she taught you when you were a baby?
As a baby, we only knew the basics. So, things like good morning or like I love you. And I remember distinctly, like as a kindergartner, so around 5 or 6 years old, getting ready in the mornings, we would use Spanish. So, la chaqueta y los zapatos and things like that. Like these are things like how we went through our checklist in the mornings, and also with like certain foods and things like that.
Wow. So would you say this is the reason why you started learning Spanish, or was there another motive for you?
I think that was probably the reason, because when I first got into languages, Spanish always had a place in my heart because of the fact that I already had the basics down. And actually, funnily enough, it wasn't until about high school when I realized that everybody didn't know the basics of Spanish. I thought it was common knowledge. I thought everyone's parents used Spanish with them at home as a kid. So that was like a fun thing to realize, and it made me want to start to learn Spanish more.
Okay, wow, very nice. And so were you actively speaking with Spanish speakers as you were growing up, since you already had like the basics down?
Yes and no. So I've had my family, we moved around a lot, so I switched schools a lot. And when I was in kindergarten, there was a student that her first language is Spanish. She didn't know any English. So she was like in the ESL program. And we became close friends because, I knew my little Spanish words and she just went with it. So I was like her only friend for the longest until, she started to branch off and make friends with my other friends and things like that. And when I was in first grade, my parents and I were staying in an area, and there was a Spanish-speaking family there too who had a little girl that was my age. So we became friends quickly, and I would like go over to their house and like chat with her parents and with her all the time. So I had like different spurts of exposure.
Okay, besides those spurts of exposure, were you taking any Spanish classes at all?
No, growing up, no.
Okay, so just that exposure with your friends and then with your mother as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever taken classes for the Spanish language?
I did. They don't completely count because when I went to university, I started in an advanced beginners class. And as of day one, my teacher was able to point out that I already knew all of the things that we were learning. And she wanted me to, test out into the intermediate level where I should have been. But I refused because I liked the idea of having the easy A. So I stuck around for that. And then I took the intermediate classes. And then I ended up taking an advanced course after that.
Okay. Would you say that you actually learned a decent amount of Spanish in those classes?
I think there were like niche things and cultural aspects that I learned, but I realized while I was taking those classes that most of the grammar and vocab I already knew. But a lot of it came into light better from where I was teaching myself beforehand and just using the language. I actually grew a lot more comfortable with the language through the classes.
Okay. Let's see. Would you encourage others to learn Spanish, and why?
I definitely think that everyone should learn every language, honestly. But yeah, Spanish is my love. That is my heart and soul. So definitely, I always encourage people to learn Spanish because it's such a great language. And I feel like learning different languages in general helps to bridge the gaps that we have between other like people's cultures and, the language barriers and things. And I feel like a lot of problems could be solved if we all understood each other.
What type of problems? If you want to explain a little bit more about that.
I think that there's, especially with the English speaking community, there's a stigma against people that don't speak English. And there's like this weird idea that your intelligence level or your worth is measured based off of how much English you know. And I really hate that mentality. So I actually make it a point to learn languages, especially when I find myself in these kind of environments. But I think that if more people were able to speak other people's languages, you also learn more about how other people think, and you learn about the different cultures through learning languages. And I think through doing that is how we can come to understand each other more and kind of get rid of a lot of the stereotypes and biases.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. So you said you learned other languages, right? What other languages are you learning right now?
Right now? Oh, I currently am learning Russian, Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, and I am planning on getting back into German while maintaining my Spanish and my French and my American Sign Language and kind of dabbling in Korean.
Which of these languages would you say is the most difficult in comparison to Spanish?
In comparison to Spanish. Oh, okay. So for the longest, German and I have had a love-hate relationship. Actually, we still have a love-hate relationship. German is the language that has costed me the most difficulty in my years of language learning. But at the moment, with learning Russian and Korean, German has some competition. At the moment, I'm thinking Korean.
Okay. Which one of these languages is the most similar to Spanish? Do you think?
Brazilian Portuguese, most definitely.
Brazilian Portuguese. Okay. So has your knowledge of the Spanish language helped you to learn Brazilian Portuguese?
Yeah, when I first started learning Brazilian Portuguese, I learned just a couple of phrases and started using them with natives. And when they responded, I quickly realized that it sounded and looked a lot like Spanish. So I was able to understand. And then when I started learning new words, there was a lot of cognates or similarities within Spanish and Portuguese. So it made it so that I reached a conversational level within 3 weeks. Yeah. And then like looking into the grammar, a lot of the grammar like was the same or very similar. So, it made it a lot easier to not have to pay attention too hard and think about like different verb tenses or, when to use imperfect versus preterite or, when to use ser versus estar because it's the same thing in Spanish.
Wow. Yeah, every time I look at like the Portuguese language, to me it just looks like Spanish but mixed up a little bit. So I would like to know, how do you keep the two languages separate?
At the moment, I haven't quite figured that out. So I started learning Brazilian Portuguese in, I think, May to early June, I think I started. And
of this year?
Yes.
Okay, very recent. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So when I started learning it and I got to the progress that I did realize that my Portuguese and my Spanish were becoming kind of mixed together. And it didn't help that one of the people that I was learning Portuguese with also speaks Spanish and English. So we kind of flowed our conversation between the three languages. So when I realized I was getting ready for my trip to Mexico, I had to put a hold on my Portuguese learning because I was like, I do not need to go to Mexico speaking Portuguese. So I did take a break. So I am slowly getting back into learning Portuguese again now.
Okay. What advice do you have for a Spanish learner? And this is not just any particular, or this is not just like a general Spanish learner, but I kind of want to break this up. So first we can talk about like the beginner Spanish learner, then the intermediate, and then advanced, if you will.
All right. So advice that I have for beginners is to start having conversations as soon as possible. even if your conversation is only hola, ¿cómo estás? Like, hi, how are you? Say that to as many people as you can. I say this because this is the tactic that I used with Brazilian Portuguese, where I started doing that, and I only knew how to say hi, how are you in Portuguese. And when I started doing that to a lot of different people, they each gave me different responses. And I slowly learned those responses to the point where I would wait for other people to ask me how I was so I could try out all these different responses. And I also learned that there were so many different ways to say, hi, how are you? So then I had to learn those too. And I learned so much just by starting with what I knew. And another thing as a beginner is getting your exposure out there and like really just getting to practice everything that you learn. If you learn the colors, find a reason to practice the colors. Like find a reason to pay attention to what colors are around you throughout your day. And you'll see you're learning the vocabulary and you're getting used to the language a lot faster than you would have if you didn't try these methods.
Okay.
And for intermediate learners, I would say definitely start to get to the point where you try to enjoy things in the Spanish language. So this will be, reading books, watching TV, listening to music. These are all things you could have started as a beginner, but as you're into this intermediate stage, you're becoming more independent with the language. So this is your time to truly fall in love with the language, truly try to look at the different things that you usually like to do and putting them into Spanish now. Once again, you can't go wrong with a Spanish conversation. And I also know a part of what keeps people in the intermediate stage and not jumping over into advanced is that they're still translating. And I think that the sooner you can get yourself to stop translating, the sooner you'll see more progression. So what I always tell people is to practice thinking in the language. Even if you start with just 1 minute a day of I'm just going to sit and I'm going to just describe what I see around me in my head, or describe what I want to think about, or think about, what I need to do today, kinds of things in Spanish. You'll also notice where you need to brush up on things. You'll notice like what vocabulary you don't have. You can take notes on that. But more importantly, you're getting your mind used to having to use the language. And I also just say that with pronunciation, I think sometimes in the beginner/intermediate stage, with pronunciation, it becomes a little bit of an issue. And for me, what I like to tell people is to read out loud. So find a Spanish article or something that's written by a native Spanish speaker and just read it out loud, because it's going to get your tongue, it's going to become like muscle memory, where you're going to see phrases that they're using and it's going to become like second nature to say the phrase in that way, that you don't have to think about how should I form this sentence. You'll remember like, oh, I remember that one time it was said like this when I was like reading it over and over again. So now I remember automatically like to say it like this. Okay. And then for advanced learners, I would say at the advanced stage, your main goal right now is to get really comfortable with understanding the nuances of the language. So that is like getting used to the different dialects, or like, slang terms, the ways that they shorten words, things like that. So learning these type of things, the best way to get to that is going to be through music and like watching movies and TV shows that were originally in the language. I guess some books and like articles will tell you that, but sometimes they're a little more formal. And then another thing for advanced learners is to learn more advanced vocabulary. So what I like to do is that I'll look at my writing. Like if I write a journal entry in Spanish, or, I'm texting someone in Spanish, or if I'm just speaking Spanish, I kind of take note of what words am I overusing, or how often am I saying, very, like, am I saying very big? Can I learn how to say gigantic? Can I learn how to say enormous? Like, can I learn words to build on what I already know? and also starting to learn more niche vocabulary. So learning more vocabulary that you can use in your day-to-day life. So depending on whatever your job is or where you are in your education and things like that, or what your hobbies are, try to start learning the Spanish words and phrases that are useful for those situations as well. And I think that that will help you a lot more.
Okay, you just gave us a whole little Spanish lesson right there. Thank you very much.
Can't help it.
No, that's great. See, I want to touch on a few things that you said. So you said that, let's see, about trying to get more, I guess, was it passionate about the language or having a love for the language, right? So, something to that
love
matter?
with it, yes.
Yeah, falling in love with it. So I've read a lot of different Spanish learners, like tweets and messages and posts, like on Reddit and on YouTube and things like that, saying that they kind of like to learn the language, but they don't love it. They don't really love, maybe, for example, the Spanish culture. They're just kind of doing it, let's say for a job or for something like that, something for whatever skill that they need. So they don't actually fall in love with it. So what advice would you give those types of Spanish learners to stay motivated?
I would say for those kind of people, that's when you really need to dig into what you like to do personally. So whatever your hobbies are, whatever, if you're someone that's really into fitness or you're really into cooking or I don't know what else kind of hobbies people have, but whatever your hobby is, remember that the Spanish community does those things too. So when you're going on YouTube and you're looking up, fitness video of someone doing this, look it up in Spanish and do it in Spanish instead. If you're looking for a new recipe, look it up in Spanish. And that way you're learning Spanish and still doing the things that you like to do. If you're someone that, you listen to the news or you read the news every morning, find the Spanish version of the news and get the news that way. So yeah, just find the things that you already love to do and just incorporate Spanish into it.
Okay, yeah, I definitely had to ask that because I know for me, I'm very passionate about the Spanish language. I love to learn languages in general, so I couldn't imagine myself trying to learn Spanish, and then not having that love, because that's what really propels me and motivates me. So thank you for answering that. And could you explain a little bit more what you mean by translating? Because you said you would advise Spanish learners to stop translating. So what exactly does that mean?
So translating is something that naturally you'll do it. I think it's very natural for you to do it as a language learner, especially in the beginning stages where you're still thinking in English and in your brain, you're saying, oh, I like cats. Okay, how do I say I like cats in Spanish? Well, I like is me gusta. Wait, but then it's plural, so now I have to say me gustan. And then cats is gatos. Me gustan gatos. And now you see how long that process went versus, oh, okay, me gustan gatos is como eso. It just comes like that versus having this full thought process. And then that's happening every time I want to speak. And then every time I'm hearing someone speak, I now have to say, okay, they said me gustan. Okay, so me gustan is together. So that's I like. And then gato, so getting past that stage of taking that extra step of figuring out what it means in English and just automatically recognizing what the Spanish is.
Now I'm curious to know, what are your favorite methods for learning Spanish?
For learning Spanish, I think I kind of mentioned them already, would be having conversations with people as much as possible. And, I love Spanish music. I love reggaeton. And so I listen to a lot of music, and I've been listening to Spanish music for years. And, getting into Spanish TV shows. So I know, almost everyone has watched Money Heist or La Casa de Papel. So, yeah. So, getting into these shows like that is really interesting. And recently I've gotten into reading. So I've been reading a lot of Spanish books, and it's been really great. So, yeah, I guess those are my favorite methods for now.
So I want to dive a little bit more into like how they have evolved. Because I know for me, when I've kind of first started learning Spanish, I was only doing, whatever, two different, study methods. But now I'm using, eight or, I'm trying out a lot of different
Mhm.
ones. So yeah, how does that progression look like for you from like once you first started learning to now?
So for me, it's a little different because, I started as a baby and just kind of using it in practice. And then when I was about, I want to say 13 is when I got into languages really, 13 or 14. I got really into languages. And what I did was I spent about a year or 2 years studying how to learn languages and looking at all of the different methods that are possible and like every different scenario and all of the different ways you can look at and approach the concept of language learning. And what I would do is I would try out every method that I found for like a couple of weeks at a time in both in Spanish, German, and French. I did this. I was trying out these different methods and going through it like that um, for a couple of years. And then when I kind of got comfortable with certain things, I continued with that. So that's why going into university, I did not really know. I didn't really know how good I was at any of these languages because I felt like I did so many bits and pieces that it took me taking the classes to realize, okay, wait, I'm past this. Like, I thought that I needed beginners, and apparently I did learn a lot more than I thought I did. Um, but yeah, so I think in the beginning stages, I was learning, I would like learn vocab words by category. So I would choose a category to go by and have like flashcards and lists of vocab that I would have, and just going over that and practicing how to use them in sentences as much as possible. And then also like slowly incorporating different aspects of grammar into that. So I would learn a grammar thing and then I would make more sentences using that and just practicing speaking a lot. And, listening to my music in the background, switching my Netflix into Spanish or whatever language it was. And then just practicing with the people around me when I could, looking up online, watching videos of other people using it. And once I got into university, I was lucky I had a roommate that was Ecuadorian. So, me and her, we got to practice our Spanish, try out different things. And she would kind of test me and like really challenge me because she was, she would like speak Spanish and I would be like, can you spell it? And I was going to say, I was like, because I was really good at like reading Spanish, but the listening part is what got me. So it's like if she could spell the word to me, I could picture it in my head. So I was at that stage where when I heard people speak, I would see like the script, like I would see it written in Spanish, and there would just be words that like didn't quite fill in the blank. So that's why like when I started taking the Spanish classes and stuff, I got more used to hearing the Spanish more and like seeing it and things like that. So that's what really helped me more than the class itself. It was more so just having an outlet to practice and be in the moment with it. So yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, kind of I've been all over the place.
I see that. And was there anybody that told you to start studying all these different methods for learning Spanish and learning languages, or did you just kind of
I
do that
just
on
did
your
it
own?
on my own. I knew that got interested in languages and I wanted to figure out how to do it. And I didn't know where to start because no one around me does these things. So I said, you know what, let me find out how to
Mm-hmm.
do it. And I fell in love with finding out how to do it. So that's why I took a little detour on language learning and was focused on how people learn languages and, watching different videos of people that speak different languages and seeing their journeys and stuff. So that's actually why I ended up majoring in linguistics because I realized I love learning about the inner workings of languages themselves as well as learning the languages.
Wow, I don't think I've ever heard that before. Someone like making their language learning, well, like I guess studying it, like making that or putting that in the back seat for a little bit just to study the different methods. That's wow, that's pretty impressive. That's a lot of
Yes.
dedication. So what exactly do you learn in linguistic classes?
In linguistic classes. So linguistics is a really broad field, and when people ask me what linguistics is, the best way I can describe it is that it is both like the science and the history of languages. So you'll get linguistics classes where you're studying where languages came from. This can either be a specific language or you're looking at language itself, like how the beginnings of language started and how it branched out into all of the different languages we have now. But then you also have the scientific aspect of linguistics where you're looking at syntax. So that's how we build sentences in everyone's different languages. So I did a general linguistics program. So what we did was, we learned, if we were in syntax class, we would learn a sentence structure. And then we would take from several different languages and see how they use that structure or if they use a different structure. And then you have like phonetics and phonology, which is talking all about the sounds of language. And so that's where you get into like the IPA chart and you kind of understand how certain sounds are only used in certain languages or how other languages use certain sounds and how it makes kind of a difference. And two of my favorite classes was the language in the brain class that I took my freshman year, where we talked about how not only like where in the brain language happens, but also how learning languages affects the brain and, like what parts of the brain are important for language learning or speaking a language in general, and, how bilingualism and things work and how babies learn language and things like that. And then I also took a writing systems class where we covered every different kind of writing system there is, which made us have to look into the different languages that uses each kind of writing system, which was really cool. We went all the way as far as, like the Mayan languages, and that was like...
I'm just about to ask you that. How far back do you guys go?
So it was really cool.
Are you learning any specific accent from a particular Spanish-speaking country?
At the moment, no. I say this because the music and like the things that I am taking in are coming from so many different angles, but in a more broad sense, I've always focused more on Latin American Spanish and like Caribbean Spanish more than European Spanish. So I will say that much as far as, not using vosotros. But that was it's mainly because it's based on who I'm around and what I'm going to have to use. So, in my city, there's not a lot of people from Spain that speak Spanish. We have a lot of Puerto Rico, Dominican. I had my roommate that was Ecuadorian, and things like that. And then my music that I listen to is more Colombian and Dominican. So so it's a big mix, and I don't really pay a lot of attention to which countries the books that I read are from, or I do know that La Casa de Papel is from Spain. So I do get some of the Spain input in as well. But so I'm kind of all over the place.
Okay. And from your observations, which accent has been the most difficult for you to understand?
I'm going to have to give it to, okay. I'm going to have to say Spain. Because I remember, I think my senior year of college, in college at some point, we had a Spanish exchange student, and she went, she overheard me and my roommate speaking Spanish, and she went, "You guys speak Spanish, I can help you guys practice." And she started speaking, and I understood not a single thing that she said. And I was like, wow, I've got work to do, It's like, it was such a culture shock. But I think now, like after having spoken Spanish with more people and getting more used to using the language with everybody now and just using it in general. I'm more used to the Spanish dialect now, but yeah, at first it was definitely Spain.
What do you wish you would have known when you first started learning Spanish? Or it could be like maybe even 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever.
I'm going to speak on this as 13-year-old Niyah. I'm going to say that I did not know if apps like Tandem and Hello Talk existed back then. They might have, or they might not have. So I'm not really sure how this pertains, but I wish I would have found ways to speak Spanish with more people right away and like being able to connect with different people. And I also should have found Spanish music, like more Spanish music and actual Spanish shows back then instead of just switching my normal shows into Spanish.
Do you have any insecurities when it comes to learning Spanish and languages in general?
When it comes to learning Spanish, no, not really. But other languages, I'm finding that the ones that I don't have a lot of background knowledge with is that the speaking is an insecurity for me. And I do force myself to do it anyways, but you know, like with Spanish, I already had the accent. By the time I was ready to try to learn Spanish, I could already pronounce the things correctly. And I also had something to compare it to. Whereas when I had went into learning Chinese, Mandarin, and like Russian, and now Korean, and like these languages where it's like I kind of wanted to learn them out of interest and not because I knew a lot of people that were using them. It still is very difficult for me to use my voice in these languages because I don't really have something strong to base it off of, and I don't really have something to imitate, basically. Whereas like with Spanish, it's like I listen to enough music, I watched enough shows, I talked to enough people where it's like, oh, I'll kind of just, sound like them when I talk. And going into these languages where, like with Russian, the only Russian I really like hear besides the small conversations I might pass by someone on the street hearing would be like, like the TV shows where they show like the Russian people and like, and it's like, I don't know how accurate that is because we know how American TV can be. Yeah, so it's such a weird situation for me to get used to. Not only these completely different sounds, whereas like Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German and things, like they have sounds that we use. They have a couple of sounds that we don't use, but for the most part, we use them. And getting into like these sounds that are completely different from the English language, or using your voice in different ways than you're used to. So like with Chinese being a tonal language, really figuring out how to make those tones work is
What does that mean exactly?
Yeah.
A tonal language?
Absolutely. So tonal languages, these are ways when the way that you speak the syllable affects what word you're saying. So I'm terrible at Chinese. I stopped learning Chinese because I was terrible at it and I needed a break. But basically the main example that they use when you're learning Chinese is that you have the word ma. And ma can just be ma, it can be ma, it can be ma, it can be ma, and it can be ma. So as an English speaker, they all sound the same. It took forever to kind of understand what they were. And when I was actively learning Chinese, I was able to do them one at a time, but it was putting them all the way in a full sentence that I could just not, my brain could not put those together at all. I would forget how to make the tones go up and down within one thing. And it was also a really big difference for me coming from, English language and like my other languages where if I'm asking a question, I'm going to start to speak up at the end, That's how we ask questions. I can't come
Yeah.
up with an example right now, but if I was to ask a question, my last word would usually start to go up. Whereas in Chinese, there's just random syllables that go up throughout the sentence, and you might end your question going down. So yeah, getting used to that was really difficult.
I know that many language learners have had that insecurity of speaking as well. Like, yeah, you had it with different languages. I have it a lot with the Spanish language. And I was wondering, what advice would you give to these language learners to really confront this insecurity? Because I would say it's one of those insecurities that can really prevent you from progressing. Because if you have that type of insecurity from speaking, then you feel very uncomfortable. You're just not going to do it. You're not going to attempt to speak. So what advice do you
So
have for those?
my advice for this is, firstly, back to what I mentioned in the beginning, is reading out loud. So this is something, it is no stress, no one has to be around you. And it's just taking readings and reading them out loud. So when I was in Chinese class and, I knew that our textbook had little paragraphs in Chinese, I would, outside of class, just make sure I was reading this text out loud over and over again throughout the week, and just getting, really focusing in on what was going on. And I say that to do that, without any judgment, but I also would take that step forward and find language partners where I would send them a picture of the text I was trying to read, and then I would read the text and have them go through and correct what I was doing. And then I was able to do it again. And then I just kept doing it until I was mostly getting it all right. I never got it completely right because I was a beginner, but until I was, not making as many mistakes as I did that first time. And I was still reading very slow and it wasn't coming out correctly, perfectly. But doing that more made me more confident when I had to speak in class or when I had to practice with other people. And another thing that I tell people is that, you can record yourself. You can, sit in front of your own camera, and you don't have to post this at all. No one else ever has to see it, but you can keep your own little video diary and practice what you're doing, and just practice speaking and saying what's on your mind, or practice whatever sentences you just learned. But as much practice as you can get, just speaking out loud in general is going to slowly help you gain your confidence with speaking in front of other people. And another thing that I say that a lot of people don't recommend this, which I always think it's so weird, because most people always recommend you to go straight to natives and to teachers. But I always tell people that it's actually a lot easier to start speaking if you're speaking to someone else that's learning. So, this can be someone that's on the same level as you. This can be someone that is slightly above you or you're above them in as far as level of fluency in the language. But speaking with another learner is really helpful as well, because they understand the struggle. A lot of times when you talk to natives, they can't really help you with everything because for them it's common knowledge. They just always have done it. So if you're talking to someone who also is learning this language, they can tell you, hey, I remember having trouble with this. This is how I remember it, or this is how I got to it. So I think that working with other people who are learning is another way to kind of bridge the gap before you're ready to talk to natives as often, or, talk in front of class and things like that. I visited the Dominican Republic and recently Mexico. That's it.
Okay. Those two.
Yeah,
Very nice. That's a good start. Which one did you like the best?
Mexico. I absolutely love Mexico, and it's going to be an annual trip. So, but to be fair, when we travel to Dominican Republic and when we travel to Mexico, we were on resorts. So, we weren't in a pueblo and we weren't in La Comunidad. We were on a resort, but I just really liked what you could see differently. So when we were in Dominican Republic, where our resort was, it was kind of in the middle of nowhere. So, when you drive from the airport to the resort, there was the scenery that you saw in Dominican Republic, and just the way that the people interacted with each other and with you was completely different than when we were in Mexico. Yeah.
Wow.
But it was like, you know, I can't really judge the country because, like I said, that was resort situation and it was very niche area. But I absolutely love Mexico. So yeah.
Okay. Which country, which Spanish-speaking country is next on your list besides Mexico?
Definitely Colombia. And yes, gotta go to Colombia at least once in my life. And I'll probably end up going to Spain, believe it or not. Just because my family in Germany and they travel to Spain a lot. So I feel like at some point I should, check out Spain and see what it's all about.
Okay. And what draws you to Colombia?
Is the music. Most of the song artists that I listen to are Colombian. So, it makes you kind of want to see what it's like there that inspired this from them, like this artistic creativity from them.
Yeah, there you have it right there. That's exactly what learning Spanish will do. It takes you to like just different places all the time. I like that a lot. That's what's happened to me. I'm like, I like Mexican culture a little bit, so I'm gonna go there and visit, see how it is. That's awesome. What is your studies schedule like for Spanish?
For Spanish?
Do you have one?
No.
Do you even have one? Or?
I do not. At the moment, I am maintaining Spanish, so I'm not actively studying it at all. So my Spanish schedule basically means that weekly I have a Spanish call for at least an hour, sometimes an hour and a half with a friend. And then I'm also talking with Spanish speakers daily on Tandem and things like that. So either through voice messages, through texting, video calls or anything, whatever works in the moment. And then I am reading at least a chapter, sometimes probably 2 or 3 chapters of a Spanish book each day. And naturally I think in Spanish, so that kind of helps too. And when I have time, I'll watch TV in Spanish. And then I have Spanish songs on rotation on my playlist. So whenever I turn my music on, there's going to be Spanish in the background at some point, and I'm going to sing along, so it helps.
But what is your favorite Spanish word and phrase?
Okay. My favorite Spanish word or phrase. It's really funny because it doesn't really mean a lot at all. I always say por eso. I don't know, it flows so much better. Like, I feel like it's a perfect place to put into a sentence. It goes so perfectly into a sentence, and I don't think the English equivalents really capture what I want the way, like, as smoothly as it goes in Spanish. So I always say por eso. Or, I don't know, I love Spanish filler words, just in general. I say entonces, pues. Yeah, so I'm going to have to name those because those are the ones that I say if I'm speaking English in a perfectly English conversation with no one that speaks Spanish around me, you are going to hear these words come in. And I'm always just like, I'm sorry. I know.
Just gotta sprinkle it in a little bit.
Like, it just happens.
Well, yeah, thank you very much for sharing all your knowledge with us. You obviously have a lot of experience and just a lot going on in your head language wise, a mixture of languages and experience and methods. So it's really good to tap into that knowledge for me as well, because I've learned a ton from you. So thank you very much for being a part of this podcast. And also, how can the audience reach out to you if they would like, or are you on any social media or anything like that?
So I have an Instagram account dedicated to languages and everything study related, honestly. And do you want me to, should I say it or do you want to type it?
Yeah, you can say it. And I'll just make sure that I link it in the
Okay,
description box
so
of the
my
video as well.
Instagram is at language.studygram_. And then I have a YouTube channel where I talk about languages and studying and now books apparently. And that is Study with Niyah. So yeah, you can reach me on either of those. I'm always there and always answering questions and taking requests for content.
To ask a lot of questions for my Spanish learning journey. So I'm excited for that too.
Yeah,
I need a lot of help.
I'm always just like feeding people information with everything.
Thank you very
Hasta
much.
luego.
Y hasta luego.